Today, we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Incline Station Red is a red ink, although a kind of dusty red. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Fountain Pen Revolution Himalaya with their flex nib to take my notes for this video. Before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down, immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is this kind of really diluted red that's left behind. All the dark red immediately pushes up the chromatography paper, and it doesn't seem to travel very far. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and we see that there is a lot of hold on the bottom. A lot of that ink really set into place, which is good for protecting it, and I expect is going to be fine for cleaning from the pen. We do see that kind of orange, very light red push up and the darker red come in at the top. It very much looks the same there. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more important, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. Looking at the highlighter, it seems to perform perfectly fine under the highlighter. It reactivates, and the second H is the only part that reactivated. A little bit of it moved, but I don't think it's going to destroy the writing if you had to highlight this in your notes. Looking at the water, we see that while a bunch of it reactivates and pulls up off the page, a lot of it is left behind. So that dark line from the chromatography where I let it dry, it looks like this might have a bit of stick around or resistance, since it's a resistance test. Pen flush does very much the same thing that the water does. It makes me feel that the flush is not doing much more than water if I had to use that to clean out of my pens. So I'm really hoping that water is all that it would take, because flush doesn't look like it's doing much more. Now bleach completely obliterates this, pulls it entirely off, only leaves a tiny little bit of a dark spot. It's not a yellow staining, it's this darker kind of haze left on the paper. I'm just hoping that there's no need to get to the bleach stage to get this out of your pens. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red has a viscosity of 2.06, putting it just outside of normal as a wetter ink. To find my average dry times, I use the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Rhodia, and Tomoe River in my writing samples. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red has an average dry time of 13 seconds, which puts it just inside normal. So both the viscosity and the dry time are in that same region. One is right on normal, one is just outside of normal. Now, let's look at the writing samples. So I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing sample consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's talk about these sample bottles. Every time I do this, I start to feel like if I go to their neighborhood, I'm going to wind up beat up in a back alley for picking on them over this stuff. So if I find my way up towards you guys, just don't kick my butt over this. That's all I'm asking. You know, trying to have a peaceful day here. Just a very messy day. If you're going to open these up, open them up in a very ink safe place. I have found that I have to put it on a paper towel and carefully open it, because there's this inner plastic thing that will put ink on your fingers so that you can smear it all over everything. It's fantastic. One of the greatest things ever. They should put it on every sample vial so that you could create the same mess with every sample you ever open. What I want is walls that look like this, said no one ever. This is horrible. This is horrible. I know I started out by saying, you know what, I really like the fact that you try something different. And I really do applaud you're trying something different. Stop it. Stop it. Bad. This is not working. Look, the Himalaya, this is not a big nib. That thing's hard to get in there. You know, come on. You're making it really hard for people. What happens if I tried? Even the Like Alpha would have its issues. Everything's going to have its issues getting ink from here. I don't want to have to decant this into a different sample. And I don't want to have to fill up a syringe to fill up a converter. If I was putting it into a cartridge and I fill a syringe, that's fine. But I have to fill a syringe to fill a converter to not make a mess. And the mess gets made just from opening it. I'm going to encourage you to go to the normal sample vial that everybody else is using, only to avoid making my house messy on an entirely selfish side of things. So let's look at Clairefontaine. Now that I've rambled forever, I'm sorry, and I'm going to try and go kind of quick for people. Clairefontaine, we have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Look at that crazy shading all over the place. This red shades really well in most pens. I say most pens because when I use it in a very wet or flexy type pen, like this FPR, the Himalaya, but it's got a flex nib. And when I took my notes, I got almost no color variation. I lost all the shading for using a very wet flow. But the 1.1, fantastic. And when I went to the extra fine, it's a noticeably darker tone. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and yes, shading all over the place. Very nice shading. I liken the shading to faded red, sun faded red, to new painted red. So it's really nice. 6 seconds to dry. The medium, noticeably darker tone, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We lost the shading for it being a wetter run, a wetter pen. 12 seconds to dry. Scrubby shows us we're not going to get any color variation with the medium, and we do get color variation with the extra fine. That's exactly what we got in a writing sample. Now the smear test, I believe you could recover this. So Tomoe River. Tomoe River gives us no bleeding. It does give ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread. It does give haloing. Very nice haloing. It doesn't give any sheen, but this ink doesn't have sheen. And it gives shading. It's the only shading that we get on this paper, but we do get some nice shading. So use a stub on Tomoe River with this ink. Extra fine. It's a noticeably darker tone, but it has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and took 11 seconds to dry. Again, a noticeably darker tone with the medium is no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 29 seconds to dry. Now these two writing samples went exactly as you figured based on the Scrubby. Scrubby showed us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. The smear test said don't write on Tomoe River if you want to make a mistake because you're not going to be able to recover it. You're not going to be able to recover if you smear on that. Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, it has shading all over the shading. Noticeably darker tone with the extra fine. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, shading. Very nice. Very pretty shading as we move through here. Really a lovely light to dark on the Q, and then it goes to light again and dark. It's really nice. Really nice. It's hard to get nice red inks that do this, and this one hits the spot. This is one I think I'm going to go out and get a bottle of, and then just know I don't use it in my broad pens. Use it in a stub. No problem. Medium, noticeably darker tone. With that noticeably darker tone and a wetter pen, we have no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It's lost. 13 seconds to dry. Now the Scrubby for the extra fine shows color variation that we got. The Scrubby for the medium shows us no color variation. And the smear test says, you know what, you actually might be able to recover this one. I think you could. So I tested Levenger paper. We got no bleeding, no ghosting. The Levenger paper does very well. Totally underrated in the communities. The biggest problem I have is how small their lines are. Levenger, please, make thicker lines. Make like a 10 mil line. I'll live with that. I want to use your notebooks. I can't use your notebooks because your lines are so thin. Help me out, Levenger. Please. Please. Because I like your paper. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, we got shading, ladies and gentlemen, all over the place. This ink does it. It really does it. As a red ink, not too many red inks just do this to me. I know we had the Dragon's Napalm that's kind of an orangey pink. Here's a red that's fantastic. Shading all over the place. The extra fine, noticeably darker tone. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Yes, we do get subtle shading all over the place. And only 5 seconds to dry. Now we go to the darker, wetter pen, or the wetter pen, we get the noticeably darker tone with medium. No feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 9 seconds to dry. Still a really nice shade of red. The Scrubby for the extra fine shows us we're going to get color variation, and we did. And the Scrubby for the medium, no color variation, and we don't. The smear test says we can likely recover both. So I looked at black and red paper. I'm trying to move along here because I rambled so much in the beginning, and I try to keep this part to, like 8.5 minutes. So I got about 30 seconds here. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Still get some shading, not tons of shading, but tons of great shading in there. Extra fine, noticeably darker tone with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and yes, still getting shading. On the black and red paper that tends to be a little more absorbent, we're getting some nice shading with the extra fine. 5 seconds to dry. Noticeably darker tone for the medium with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 8 seconds to dry. Now when we look at the Scrubby, the extra fine says we're going to get some color variation, and we did. The medium says we're not going to get any, and we didn't. The smear test, I don't think you'd be able to recover it. And that's all that I have for the writing sample. Finding inks that look like Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I went with a blue because I think blues and reds go nice together, and I chose Diamine Eau De Nil because it's a very nice blue ink. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Birmingham Pen Company's Incline Station Red? I think it looks like red paint on metal that's been sun faded. It is a very distinct red color. It's quite nice. It gives a lot of very nice shading, but I would avoid it in super wet or flexi pens because you kind of lose some of the great effect that this ink can have. Thanks for watching.